My name is Thomas, and I'm the kind of husband people whisper about behind cocktail glasses, greedy, arrogant, emotionally bankrupt. At least, that's the character I play. And let me tell you, I play it beautifully. The wine was cold, too cold to be anything but expensive, and it trickled down the stem of the crystal flute like blood from a fresh kill. I held it just high enough to catch the ballroom lights before throwing it across the room in a sweeping, theatrical arc. The splash landed exactly where I wanted, center mass on Michael's tailored tuxedo. The gasps? Right on cue. Oh no, I murmured, raising a hand to my mouth in fake horror. My hand slipped. I must be drunk on the scent of betrayal. Laughter rippled through the crowd, tight and uncomfortable. Susanna stood at the far end of the ballroom, her expression unreadable as always, one hand loosely curled around her champagne. She didn't flinch. She never did. Not when I insulted Michael. Not when I burned the merger contract in our fireplace. Not even when I publicly declared that marrying her was the biggest mistake of my net worth. But that was part of her charm. I strolled forward, the hem of my black velvet suit coat trailing behind me like I was on a runway made for revenge. The whispers rose, some disgusted, others delighted. Good. Let them see the show. The world eats up men like me, villainous husbands too handsome for jail time. I gave them what they wanted. Michael, I drawled, stopping just short of him, I always thought your clothes looked cheap. Now they look cheap and marinated. Tell me, do you think Susanna's perfume covers the scent of desperation? Michael's fist clenched. I hoped he'd hit me. I really did. Nothing sells the image of a shameless parasite better than a black eye in a charity gala photo. But the fool restrained himself. I turned slowly, dramatically, to face the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, raising my arms like a circus ringmaster. Tonight's entertainment is brought to you by 1 year of marital bliss, 10 million in investments I'll never see again, and the hope that my wife will finally do the right thing, and dump me. Still no movement from Susanna. Her eyes, blue and glacial, locked onto mine. I smiled like the devil holding a signed prenup. In my mind, I could already hear the papers hitting the table, divorce, signed, sealed, delivered. $5 billion. I'd rehearsed this scene countless times. The smirk. The toss. The jab at the rival. I'd storyboarded it in my head like a film noir montage. All I needed was Susanna to walk over and end it all. Publicly. Coldly. The way only she could. Instead, she raised her glass and sipped. My smile flickered for half a second. Just half. I recovered, bowing mockingly to the audience. No applause? That's fine. I work better in tragedy. And then I did the unthinkable. I pulled the pristine, hand-stitched contract from my jacket, yes, that one, the final agreement between Sterling Holdings and their newly acquired biotech empire, and tore it straight down the middle. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Susanna still didn't move. The silence felt surgical. I took a deep breath and whispered under it all, just loud enough for no one to hear but myself, "Come on, Susanna. Stick to the script. People think being a villain is easy. That you just wake up, scowl at the mirror, and ruin someone's life before breakfast. But true villainy, the kind that makes headlines, breaks hearts, and earns you a $5 billion payout, takes rehearsal. I wasn't born a parasite. I became one. Carefully. Deliberately. With the dedication of a stage actor chasing an Oscar. From the moment I married Susanna, I treated my life like a carefully penned script. Scene 1, seduce the CEO. Scene 2, marry her in a high-profile winter wedding. Scene 3 through 87, slowly reveal myself to be the worst decision she's ever made. I've thrown tantrums at board meetings. Slept till noon on investor days. Made wild accusations at press conferences. My goal? To look so irredeemably incompetent that Susanna would divorce me with maximum PR distance, and, more importantly, maximum compensation. But Susanna Sterling never plays along. Where I'm fire and chaos, she's ice and silence. A statue carved from northern wind. She doesn't shout. She doesn't react. She simply watches, calculating, timeless, infuriatingly elegant. I once screamed at her in front of a dozen shareholders. Her response? A polite smile, a sip of sparkling water, and a soft, "Thank you for your input, Thomas." As if I'd just complimented her shoes instead of publicly declaring that her company was being run like a preschool with credit cards. She drives me insane. Which is ironic, because I've spent an entire year trying to look insane just so she'd leave me. My days are divided into two categories, rehearsal and sabotage. I keep a notebook filled with lines I plan to use in front of investors. Things like nepotism is a love language or what's an IPO? Is that like an NFT? I once wore flip-flops to a shareholders' dinner. On purpose. I told them the leather made my feet sweat. They hated me. Susanna didn't blink. The harder I try to sabotage myself, the more she adapts. I've called myself a leech, a trophy husband, an accident in designer clothing. She just folds her arms, tilts her head, and gives me a look that feels like she's memorizing my worst angles for later use. She never fights me. Never cries. Never files the papers. And that makes her terrifying. I remember the first time I saw her, really saw her. It wasn't during our engagement or the wedding photos or even our first PR interview as a couple. No, it was during a rainstorm, outside a glass building, where she stood without an umbrella, staring up at a billboard of her own face. Her expression was unreadable. Proud? Angry? Hollow? I couldn't tell. She looked like a woman watching a version of herself she didn't recognize, and didn't particularly care for. That's when I knew she was dangerous. Not because of her wealth, or her power, or the way the board bowed when she walked in. No, it was because she was the only person I'd ever met who didn't seem bound to the script. Everyone else is predictable. Play the villain, and the world reacts accordingly. But Susanna? She rewrites. Now here we are, a year into our marriage. I faked 2 emotional breakdowns, sabotaged 3 acquisitions, and insulted 6 VPs. I'm running out of scenes. The audience is getting bored. The only way out is escalation. Enter, Melvina. Melvina is Susanna's assistant. Always quiet. Always observing. She blends in so well you forget she's there until she clears her throat at exactly the right moment. I've caught her watching me sometimes, not with judgment, but with something worse, curiosity. Like she's trying to understand why the hell someone would actively try to get thrown out of paradise. She reminds me of a librarian with a knife tucked in her boot. If Susanna is the queen, Melvina is the ghost in the walls, loyal, silent, efficient. I don't know what she thinks of me, but I suspect she knows more than she lets on. Sometimes I wonder if she's taking notes. Sometimes I think she's the only one who understands that everything I say is rehearsed. And then there's Michael. Michael is Susanna's golden boy, polished, principled, nauseatingly earnest. He's everything I pretend not to be. Clean cut. Ivy League. The kind of guy who offers to drive your mother to her dentist appointment and actually means it. He's also the man everyone thought Susanna would marry. They have history. I know because I've seen the way people look at them when they're in the same room. Like watching a royal couple pretend they're not still married in spirit. Michael used to be a VP at Sterling Enterprises before stepping down for personal reasons. That's code for he loved her, she didn't love him back, and now they pretend it was mutual. Or maybe she did love him. Once. But here's the thing about Michael, he's too perfect. And perfect people crack. I've done my research. Found little things. Whispers from old deals. A few PR blips that vanished too quickly. He's good at hiding it, but no one wears a mask that tight without suffocating eventually. I've been keeping him close. Playing dumb. feeding him lines like, "If she leaves me, maybe she'll come back to you." Watching his reaction. He tries so hard to look noble, but his jaw always tightens. His hands always twitch. He wants her. He wants my place. But he doesn't realize, there's no script for winning against Susanna. There's only surviving. Sometimes I wonder what she thinks when she sees us circling each other. Does she find it amusing? Does she enjoy the war we're pretending not to wage? Or is she orchestrating the whole thing from her high-glass office, sipping jasmine tea while pulling every invisible string? I once asked her, "Do you ever get tired of being worshipped?" She looked up from her tablet and said, "Only when it's undeserved." Then went back to work. That's Susanna Sterling for you. The woman who doesn't need to raise her voice to own the room. The woman whose silence is louder than my best monologue. The woman who, despite all my chaos, hasn't blinked once. Not even when I burned a $20,000 painting in our foyer just to make a point I don't remember. She keeps everything close. Her emotions. Her thoughts. Her endgame. And the scariest part? Sometimes I think she sees me. Not the villain. Not the parasite. Not the idiot playing games with his future. Me. And that terrifies me more than anything else. The champagne hadn't even lost its fizz when I made my next move. Sabotage wasn't just strategy for me, it was theater. I needed spectacle, drama, collateral damage. After all, no one files for divorce over a quiet disagreement. They file when their name ends up trending on social media next to phrases like "CEO's deranged husband goes off script again." So I lit the match. The next morning, I showed up to the Sterling Enterprises quarterly press review in a cherry red silk pajama set and mirrored sunglasses. When Melvina tried to intercept me at the elevator, I simply patted her on the head and said, "Sweetheart, the king is hungover and has opinions." She didn't flinch, but I swear I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. She knew what I was doing. She always did. The press room was packed. Investors. Shareholders. PR teams. Michael was already there, sharp in a navy pinstripe suit, shaking hands, and doing that boy-next-door smile that made people trust him instinctively. I hated how clean he looked. How effortless. Perfect. So I did what I do best. "I just want to make one thing clear before we start," I announced, sauntering to the podium and pulling the mic close. "Everything Michael's about to present today is a lie. But don't worry, it's a very well-rehearsed lie. 5 stars. Would invest again." Gasps. Some laughter. Mostly confusion. A few reporters scribbled frantically. Michael's smile stiffened. "Thomas, this isn't." "Oh, please," I cut in. "Let's not pretend. You're not here because you care about quarterly growth. You're here because you think the board still sees you as the rightful prince of this empire." He stepped forward. "This is a serious meeting. You're embarrassing Susanna." "No," I said, pulling a folded document from my pajama pocket. "What's embarrassing is this acquisition plan. 83 pages of fluff and fantasy. Susanna didn't sign off on this. You think she's stupid?" I tossed the paper in the air. It fluttered like snow, like ash, like confetti from a funeral no one mourned. And then I looked at her. She was seated in the center of the table, flawless as always, dressed in a soft gray pantsuit that looked sculpted by architects. Her hands were folded neatly. Not a single muscle moved. Not her brow. Not her lips. Not even her breath. My heart thudded once. Just once. A warning drum. "Come on, Susanna. This is the moment. Stand up. Condemn me. Call security. Shred me in front of the board. Give me my damn exit." She didn't. Instead, she looked at Michael. "Is this true?" Her voice was quiet but carried like a blade through the room. Michael hesitated. "Of course not. He's trying to derail." She raised a hand. Just once. He stopped. She turned her gaze back to me. Thomas. My name sounded like a courtroom sentence in her mouth. Yes, darling? I replied, voice sweetly venomous. She stood. The entire room followed, like gravity had shifted. I had reservations about the plan, she said, walking slowly toward me. I wanted to delay the announcement. I see now that I should have listened to you. Silence. I blinked. Wait. What? Michael's face cracked. Just a flicker, but I saw it. Confusion. Shock. A betrayal he wasn't prepared for. She reached my side. Took my arm. Looked at the room. This press conference is over, she said. Effective immediately. Any future proposals must go through the executive committee, with Thomas's sign-off. I almost laughed. I almost screamed. This wasn't part of the script. This was the opposite of the script. The crowd began to disperse, murmurs thick in the air. Michael stepped forward, jaw tight. You're letting him sabotage the company because you're, what? Protecting him? Defending this act? Susanna turned her head. This act, she repeated, has exposed flaws in your leadership. I suggest you focus on fixing those. He stared at her. Then at me. And for the first time since I'd entered this company, he looked small. Shaken. Perfect. Except, it didn't feel perfect. I was supposed to be the villain, remember? I was supposed to be the chaos that forced her hand. Why was she defending me? Why was she using my sabotage to dismantle him? Back in her office, I paced. That was not in the plan, I muttered. Susanna sat at her desk, reading documents like nothing had happened. Melvina stood quietly in the corner, typing something on a tablet. I was supposed to look insane, I snapped. You were supposed to snap. You were supposed to hand me divorce papers, not drag me to the finish line like a dam partner. She didn't look up. You're impossible, I muttered, laughing without joy. I tear up contracts. I slander your golden boy. I come to meetings looking like a Vegas magician on ketamine and you still won't break. Still nothing. I leaned closer, voice low. Tell me something, Susanna. Are you playing a game I don't understand? She looked up slowly. No, Thomas, she said. I'm playing a game you wrote. Melvina paused her typing for exactly 1 second. Then resumed. I didn't respond. Couldn't. Because for the first time in a year, I realized I might not be the one writing the script anymore. I was losing control of the narrative. Which was absurd, because I wrote the damn thing. Scene after scene, scheme after scheme, I poured my soul into this performance, the role of a charming disaster, a bottom-feeding husband who just wanted out. All I wanted was the ending. The credits. The $5 billion. And yet, every time I delivered what should have been the final act, Susanna rewrote the script without blinking. It was infuriating. I spent that night in the penthouse guest room, lying on Egyptian cotton sheets that smelled like lavender and corporate indifference, staring at the ceiling and replaying the press conference. Why did she defend me? Why did she tear Michael down instead? And most importantly, what was she gaining by keeping me? I dragged a hand down my face. My reflection in the mirrored ceiling looked tired. Gaunt. Hollowed out like a house that used to throw parties but now just echoed in silence. The dramatic monologues I rehearsed in the bathroom weren't hitting like they used to. Pull it together, Thomas, I muttered. You're not a CEO. You're a parasite. A parasite with a plan. But the plan was starting to rot. I'd always imagined the divorce as a clean break, something grand, cinematic. Me in a courtroom, theatrically ruined. Susanna walking out with perfect posture and dry eyes. The settlement sliding across a marble table, and me boarding a jet with nothing but a bottle of champagne and a suitcase full of freedom. That vision had been my religion. But lately? That vision kept flickering. Because no matter how reckless I got, no matter how many times I made her look like a fool, she didn't flinch. She just adjusted. As if her version of reality couldn't be broken. Only rearranged. I stood at the kitchen island the next morning, shirtless, nursing black coffee and a fresh wave of dread. Melvina walked past on her usual schedule, eyes barely lifting from her tablet. "Morning, Mr. Sterling," she said. "It's Vance," I snapped. "Thomas Vance. Not Sterling." "Of course," she replied without stopping. I glared at the espresso machine like it owed me answers. When Susanna entered, perfectly dressed in a navy sheath dress and heels sharp enough to pierce the market, I braced for her usual indifference. Instead, she walked over, picked up a muffin from the tray, and set it on a plate in front of me. "I had them add flax," she said. "You've looked pale." "Pale? Excuse me?" I asked. She didn't look up. "You haven't been sleeping." Your voice was hoarse at the press conference. "Your vitals are likely spiking again." I stared at her. Are you checking my vitals?" "We're married," she said simply. "And the contract says I'm responsible for your health." "That contract," I hissed, "is supposed to expire." "That's the whole point." She tilted her head. "Is it?" I was going to lose my mind. Later that day, I intentionally botched a meeting with a French tech partner. I called their founder a baguette with Wi-Fi. I suggested replacing their logo with a croissant. I wore socks with sandals. Susanna smoothed it all over in 2 emails and a smile. I hijacked an internal newsletter and wrote a piece titled 10 Reasons Why I Should Be Fired Immediately, Number 7 Will Haunt You. She had it republished in Forbes as a radical transparency model. I leaked a fake story about myself to a gossip blogger involving gambling, twins, and an ostrich. She bought the blog. No matter what I did, she bent the world around it. Like she knew where I'd strike before I even lifted the knife. And that's when the paranoia started. One night, I stood in the walk-in closet staring at rows of perfectly spaced suits and whispered, "What if she knows? What if she knows this is all performance? What if she sees the script? What if she's been reading me, not my face, not my tone, but my mind?" I laughed bitterly. Paranoia. That's what this was. Guilt dressed in a tuxedo. She couldn't possibly. Could she? The next evening, we had dinner with the Sterling legal team. I arrived late, wearing ripped jeans and a shirt that read, "Hire me, I'm rich." During dessert, I asked one of the lawyers loudly if postnuptial agreements could be written in emojis. Everyone chuckled nervously. Susanna just reached for her wine and replied, "As long as the judge can distinguish between peach and moneybag. I nearly choked. That night, I dreamed of scripts burning. Pages of dialogue I had memorized for months disintegrating in a fireplace while Susanna stood nearby, toasting marshmallows over the flame. She turned to me, smiling, and said, "There is no stage anymore, Thomas. Only spotlight." I woke up drenched in sweat. At some point, my mind stopped narrating. The sarcastic voice, the one that used to give me comfort, "Don't worry, she's cold as ice. You're winning." Had gone silent. Now, there was only one voice left. Hers. "Eat something," she'd say. "Get rest. You can't win a game you don't understand." Each time she said something small, something offhand, it sounded like a script note from a director I never met but always feared. I sat in my home office, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide. The lights were too bright. The silence too thick. I typed into a blank document. How do you force someone to divorce you if they're always 5 steps ahead? Then I deleted it. Because I already knew the answer. You don't. I'd been planning the Michael maneuver for weeks. If I couldn't trigger the divorce with my own sabotage, maybe I could force Susanna's hand by aligning myself with her perfect, polished ex-rival. Together, Michael and I could engineer the kind of humiliation that no CEO could stomach, an internal implosion, a betrayal caught on tape, a complete implosion of public trust. The kind of damage that made headlines, ruined stock prices, and ended marriages. The plan was simple. I'd leak confidential company strategy slides, fake ones, of course, then stage a confrontation in front of the board, where Michael would discover my betrayal. He'd call for my resignation. Susanna, embarrassed beyond reason, would snap. It would be theatrical. Loud. And most importantly, final. Michael and I met in secret at a discreet hotel bar in Midtown. No security. No press. Just two men pretending to hate each other while actually agreeing on the terms of a mutually beneficial nuclear meltdown. We even shook hands. He looked smug, but I let it go. Let the prince feel like he was leading the revolution. His reward would be redemption in the press. Mine? A ticket out. The plan set, I muttered over the rim of a whiskey glass. When the board sees the leak, you confront me. You accuse me of sabotaging Sterling's core integrity. And Susanna? Michael asked, leaning in. She'll be forced to cut ties. She'll have no choice. Michael looked skeptical. She's not the same woman I used to know. She's exactly the same, I said with a smile. She just doesn't know she's in the third act yet. But she did. Oh, she absolutely did. 2 days later, the board meeting began. The conference room was sleek, clinical. One entire wall was digital glass, flashing analytics and trend lines. Every seat was filled. Melvina stood behind Susanna's chair, silent as ever, her eyes scanning the room like a war general's aide. Michael was already seated across from me, notes in hand, a subtle pulse ticking in his neck. I had the prop in my pocket, a flash drive with the falsified strategy deck. The moment arrived. I stood. I'd like to submit evidence, I said, voice steady, hands calm. Some concerning behavior regarding Sterling's risk portfolio and offshore investments. Susanna tilted her head slightly. Not enough to signal emotion, just awareness. Michael stood too. Actually, I also have something to present. Here we go. The trap was baited. I turned toward him, ready to feign panic. Michael, don't. But then Susanna raised her hand. Both of us froze. Sit down, she said quietly. The room obeyed. Even the air seemed to stop moving. She tapped her tablet. The wall lit up behind her. A video file. Before we begin, she said, let's watch a clip that recently came into my possession. She pressed play. There we were, me and Michael. Hotel bar. Hidden camera angle. My voice clear as crystal. If we do this right, I said in the video, Susanna will have no choice but to cut me loose. The video continued. Every line. Every phrase. Our handshake. Michael's face drained of color. The board stared. Some gasped. One man dropped his pen. I sat motionless. My heart, though? It wasn't beating. It was screaming. The clip ended. The silence afterward was unbearable. Susanna stood. She didn't look at me. She looked at Michael. I tolerated your presence out of courtesy, she said. Because of what we once shared. But this. She let the sentence die. Michael tried to recover. Susanna, he manipulated me. Enough, she said. 2 security officers entered. No words were exchanged. They moved directly to Michael, who stood stiffly, face rigid with panic. Escort him out, Susanna said. And ensure his badge is deactivated within the hour. Michael looked to me for help. I smiled. Just a twitch. She's not the same woman you used to know, remember? He was gone within seconds. The board murmured. A few glanced at me with disgust, others with pity. But Susanna raised her hand again, and the room returned to silence. She looked at me now. Really looked. And that's when I felt it, that same cold press of inevitability that I used to mistake for power. I knew about the meeting before you walked into the bar, she said. How? I asked. I always know, she said simply. I opened my mouth to respond, but she continued. I know you've been crafting stories, Thomas. Building little scenes. Trying to paint yourself as the villain. My throat tightened. I know about the time you left the burner on in the kitchen so the fire alarm would interrupt my investor call. I swallowed. I know about the fake articles you paid bloggers to publish. About your fake fights with interns. The earpiece you wore to leak sound bites. Even the list on your phone, titled, How to Look Irredeemable. She took a step closer. And the best part, she whispered. I let it happen. You, what? I asked, voice cracking. I let you play your part. Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. Because I wanted to see if the man who staged his own downfall would ever realize. She paused. That the script was never his. Melvina handed her a folder. Susanna opened it and slid it across the table to me. Inside were screenshots. Logs. Wire transfers. Hotel footage. Michael's phone records. I didn't just feel exposed, I felt surgically dissected. Why now? I asked. She looked at me with something unreadable. Because I wanted to see your face when the act ended. The board sat frozen. No one moved. Even the projector had gone black. She turned back to them, calm as a glass lake. This board will convene in 30 minutes. Until then, Thomas and I have personal matters to discuss. She walked out of the room without waiting to see if I'd follow. I did. Like a puppet chasing its own strings. In her office, she stood near the window, back to me. You were supposed to hate me, I said quietly. I don't, she replied. You were supposed to give up. I don't give up. I laughed, hollow. So what now? You own me? She turned. No, Thomas, she said. I already did. Melvina stepped inside briefly, placed a small silver box on the table, and left again without a word. Inside was a ring. The original wedding band. I hadn't seen it in months. I had it resized, Susanna said softly. It kept falling off your finger. I stared at her. You knew everything, I whispered. From the beginning. She nodded. And you played along. For a while. Why? She smiled, just barely. Because watching you try to manipulate me was the most entertaining thing that's ever happened in my entire life. And for the first time, I truly didn't know what came next. The Sterling Foundation Gala was a spectacle designed for royalty, the kind of event where journalists wore tuxedos and the champagne budget could rival a mid-sized nation's GDP. A golden-lit ballroom, a crescent-shaped balcony full of donors, and a red carpet that snaked all the way from the city's oldest opera house to the venue entrance. In other words, the perfect stage. I arrived fashionably late, of course. Not because I was important, but because I had a role to play. Tonight was supposed to be my final performance, the act that would finally, definitively detonate everything. My name. My reputation. My connection to Susanna. The plan was simple. Michael, stripped of all company affiliation but still clinging to his pretty boy reputation, was going to leak forged documents tying me to insider trading. I would react in a way only a guilty husband could, loud, careless, and theatrical. Susanna, publicly disgraced, would finally cut me loose. Everyone would win. Michael would be the martyr. I'd be the exiled villain. Susanna would clean up the mess and walk away stronger. That was the plan. Until I walked into the ballroom and saw her. Susanna stood under the grand chandelier, dressed in obsidian silk with silver embroidery that shimmered like frost. Her hair was pinned into a precise chignon. Her eyes swept across the room like a security system scanning for flaws. And then she smiled. Not at me. At the crowd. At the cameras. Because tonight's show wasn't mine. It was hers. I moved to the bar. Ignored the elbow brushes, the murmurs of "that's her husband," the mocking glances. I welcomed them, actually. I needed to look like I didn't belong. The villain on borrowed time. And then Michael arrived. He wore guilt well. Just enough hesitation in his smile. Just enough pity in his eyes when he glanced my way. He approached Susanna like a man begging for closure, or redemption. And she let him. She smiled. She touched his elbow. They whispered, laughed, posed for the cameras. The press ate it up. I leaned into the marble bar and ordered neat whiskey. Any moment now, the leak would drop. The screens would flash with documents. Someone would scream "insider trading," and Michael would perform heartbreak. Susanna would explode. Security would drag me out. And then? Freedom. Flashbulbs started going off near the main stage. Susanna stepped up to the mic, with Michael standing beside her like the White Knight returned from exile. I downed the whiskey. Showtime. Susanna's voice rang through the hall. Calm. Elegant. Cut like a scalpel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your generosity tonight. The Sterling Foundation's Global Relief Initiative has raised over $28 million. But before we close the evening, I'd like to make a brief announcement, personal, but relevant. Cameras surged forward. My heart surged with them. She turned slightly toward Michael. For the past year, many of you have wondered about our company's internal shifts. Rumors have circulated. Questions have been asked. She turned her eyes to me, just for a breath. Then back to the crowd. I'd like to clarify those now. Here it comes. She gestured. The ballroom's massive digital wall lit up. Dozens of photos appeared. Videos. Screenshots. Bank transfers. Passport scans. But they weren't of me. They were of Michael. The crowd gasped. On screen, Michael in Paris with the heiress of a vineyard, smiling over €1 million transfer. In London with a viscount's daughter, his signature on a trust document. In Tokyo at a charity gala, caught whispering to an energy tycoon's niece. The timeline was brutal. A series of well-dressed cons relationships built for leverage. Women left with broken hearts and lighter bank accounts. Michael's mask shattered mid-breath. Susanna didn't look at him. She looked at the crowd. This is the man many of you have supported. The man some of you encouraged me to reconsider. A man who presented himself as trustworthy. Noble. Genuine. Murmurs rose. A few reporters whispered into their recorders. He is none of those things. She paused. My husband, however, she continued, has been accused of everything from incompetence to emotional negligence. And I'd like to say this, he's guilty of most of it. Laughter rippled through the room. I froze. Susanna walked to the center of the stage. But unlike the man beside me, my husband never lied about who he is. Thomas has no mask. He has no finesse. And he's never pretended to be something he isn't. She turned toward me. My breath caught. In a world of liars, con artists, and wolves in white collars, he's the one person who never tried to fool me. I blinked. What was happening? Susanna smiled. Which is why, effective tonight, I'd like to formally announce that Thomas Vance has been promoted to co-chair of the Sterling Foundation. He will assume full decision-making privileges, effective immediately. The room exploded. Flashbulbs. Gasps. The CEO's leech husband, promoted? Given control? I stood there like a statue carved from disbelief. Michael tried to speak. His voice cracked. This is absurd, he muttered. You can't be serious. Susanna finally turned to him. I was serious when I defended your reputation. I was serious when I believed you were good. She stepped forward, heels clicking like a metronome of justice. But I'm even more serious about never making that mistake again. She gestured to security. Escort Mr. Croft off the premises. He's no longer welcome at Sterling events. The cameras followed him as he left. Pale. Silent. Destroyed. And me? I stood there, unable to move. Promoted. Again. Not divorced. Not exiled. Upgraded. Susanna walked down the stage, straight to me. She adjusted the lapel of my tux like we were newlyweds, and whispered so only I could hear. You should stop looking so confused, Thomas. You married well. I didn't want this, I croaked. I wanted out. She nodded. I know. She turned back to the press, arm sliding around mine. But no one gets out until the curtain closes. And your act? She smiled, camera ready. Has just been extended indefinitely. Applause. Flash. Clap. Flash. I smiled. Just like I'd practiced. The view from my new office was breathtaking. Corner floor. Panoramic skyline. A custom brass plaque outside the frosted glass, Thomas Vance, co-chair, Sterling Foundation. The carpet alone probably cost more than my entire first apartment. There were 2 espresso machines. A personal conference room. An assistant who called me sir without irony. And yet, I had never felt more trapped in my life. I sat behind the monolithic desk, staring at the screen I hadn't touched in hours. My name kept blinking at me, attached to memos, budgets, board schedules. Memos I hadn't written. Budgets I didn't understand. Meetings I had never agreed to. But Susanna had. Because Susanna agreed to everything. And once she did, it became law. Melvina entered with her usual soft knock, placing a thick envelope on the desk like it was a prayer offering. What's this? I asked. The week's PR briefing, sir. Coverage has been overwhelming. I opened it. Thomas Vance, the unpolished genius behind the Sterling shift. From Black Sheep 2 boardroom, the husband everyone misjudged. The man who saved Sterling? I laughed. Short. Bitter. People actually believe this? Melvina gave no response. Just her usual calm, professional poise. But her eyes lingered on me a beat longer than usual. Like she wanted to say something. Like she was starting to realize what I had already figured out. This wasn't success. This was containment. Melvina, I said, my voice low. Be honest. Do you believe any of this? She looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw it, behind the clipboard and quiet nods, her understanding. Not pity. Not admiration. Fear. Fear of the woman who had orchestrated this entire thing. Fear of the woman who had turned chaos into performance art. Fear of Susanna. She opened her mouth. Then closed it. Instead, she placed a small black card on the desk, no logo, just a golden S pressed into the center. What's this now? I muttered. Mrs. Sterling wanted you to have this, she said. It's your allowance. My, what? Melvina didn't blink. There's $5 billion on it. No spending limit. Then she walked out. I stared at the card. $5 billion. The number that had haunted me for a year. The carrot I'd chased through humiliation, sabotage, manipulation. Now it sat on my desk like a joke with too much punchline and not enough air. The door opened again. Susanna. Of course. She stepped in like she owned the oxygen. Congratulations, she said simply. The board's thrilled. They think you're brilliant. I never said a word in the meeting, I snapped. I know, she replied. That's why they liked you. She sat across from me, legs crossed, perfectly still. Why are you doing this? I asked. You earned it. No, I said. No, I didn't. She tilted her head. That's never stopped men before. I gripped the edge of the desk. Susanna, I wanted freedom. I wanted out. Divorce. Escape. A quiet island. You got the island, she said. You just didn't realize it would have an office and a security detail. I stood. This isn't what I asked for. She stood too. No, she said. But it's exactly what you deserve. Her hand brushed my cheek. Cold. Familiar. You wanted wealth. You have it. You wanted power. It's yours. You wanted recognition. You're trending. Her fingers moved to the card on my desk. And you wanted 5 billion. That's yours too. Consider it a lifetime contract. My voice cracked. You can't buy someone's soul. She smiled. I didn't. You auctioned it. I just won the bid. There was no anger in her tone. No malice. Just the steady calm of someone who had known the ending from the first page. I sank into the chair, the weight of it all pressing down like cement. This isn't a marriage, I whispered. No, she agreed. It's a masterpiece. She turned to leave. Then paused at the door. Oh, one more thing, she added, not turning back. If you ever try to run again, or think about betraying me, her voice softened, silk and steel, I'll break both of your legs. And take away your allowance. I didn't speak. Couldn't. She left. And I sat there, billionaire prisoner in a glass palace, realizing too late that I'd never been the actor. I was the script. And she had memorized every line.